Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. This week, I'm really excited to have on the show Dr. Jill Crista. So normally we have guests on the show that come on to tell their recovery stories. But this week, I wanted to switch it up a little and speak to someone whose life is solely driven by helping people recover from chronic illness. And there isn't a better candidate than Jill. Trained as a naturopathic doctor, Jill specialised in treating people with Lyme disease, but in recent years has been specialised in treating people with mold toxicity. She's the author of the book Breaking the Mold and is a consistent source of information in all of these areas online, giving people like me and others with chronic health issues the belief that we can recover. And we were just talking before the episode started, and I think it's really important to have people like Jill on so that, you know, she has experience dealing with all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds and, you know, going through all kinds of different healings. And so I thought it was really important to have someone like her on the show today so we can look at it from that perspective. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Jill.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really thrilled to be sharing all this positive vibe here for people that are in a probably not a very positive space right now if they're dealing with chronic illness.
Definitely.
Thank you.
No worries. So could you actually just give us a bit of, I gave a brief background there. Could you just give us a bit of background to, you know, how you started out? I think I mentioned that you started out more specialized in Lyme, and take us through kind of into what you're doing today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm a naturopathic doctor that's medically trained, and in the States that just means that I went to medical school learning naturopathic medicine rather than conventional medicine. So I'm trained as a family practice doc and moved into what ended up being a Lyme endemic area and also a very environmentally toxic area. We have carb processing plants, like a GM plant is in town. Then there's water or paper processing upriver. There are lead mines, 2 lead mines an hour each way from where I live. So we have lead, we have atrazine. I'm in a farming community. So, you know, we have glyphosate, Roundup, all of those kind of things. But I ended up, you know, I thought I was starting a family practice. And what's beautiful about that is you get to see the whole family and you see these trends that are happening with the whole family. And the outdoorsy families ended up having Lyme disease, people that were really into nature, that kind of thing. And that's when I learned, oh, I'm in a Lyme endemic area. I don't understand Lyme. I better go get trained. So I went to go do a specialty training in Lyme disease. And it's when you apply the principles of naturopathic medicine, which is find and treat the cause, all of a sudden then we were getting responses because we had found this hidden cause. Because I know a lot of your listeners know the testing for Lyme is not great. It's still a clinical diagnosis. It's still officially categorized as a clinical diagnosis. So, and it's the great imitator. So it can look like lots of different things. What was interesting seeing trends in families was that there were certain trends that ended up being mold related. But if someone was bit by a tick and someone else wasn't in the family, they were really the sicker person in the family. And so it was easy to see, okay, there's something different with this person. Now I understand it's Lyme disease. Got trained in Lyme disease. We applied the principles of find and treat the cause. People get better, except for this other little group of people. And it tended to run in families, and that ended up being mold problem. In one of those families, they found a toxic black mold when they were redoing the basement. And they estimated it was about 12-year history. And in my sickest patient, who did 115% of the effort to get better, did all the changes, the diet, you know, just everything, reacted weird to all the medications. You know, you would get insomnia from sleep medication. You'd get anxiety from anxiety medication. Like, what in the world is going on here? And it ended up being mold. And he had the biggest exposure to it, and a lifelong exposure as we dug and dug. And that's when Pandora's box happened. You know, a guy kind of opened it up a little bit. Like, I wonder if this mold thing is why he can't sleep. He's so anxious. He has ear ringing. His gut's a mess. He keeps spraining ankles just by stepping off the curb. He had a cancer diagnosis, kept ending up on the wrong side of the statistics. And as I dug into the research, which was primarily animal research, I learned that I knew nothing about mold. You know, I left school with environmental medicine training, kind of understanding mold as an allergy problem. And in some people, maybe it causes kind of an MS picture. That was pretty much it. But when I dug into that research, I thought, oh my goodness, I don't understand mold at all. And I don't think very many of us do, because it's just like Lyme. It's a great imitator, and it can be behind all of these other problems. Like, it can decrease the immunity to the extent that now you are a wide open doorway for parasites, for Lyme. Even if you had Lyme and your body was able to keep it under wraps, which is kind of how we treat or cure Lyme, is that you just keep it under wraps. You
Mm.
can have EBV, you can have all of these things. SIBO can happen after mold. So all of these things that we are chasing then separately have one fundamental cause, and that is mold.
So I have so many questions there from all of that. First of all, it's interesting you said that, yeah, no one really understands it. I mean, I so finally was able to get like a diagnosis of, with mold last year, and I needed to start then trying to get the medication and, the different things that I could get that. And so I was trying to speak to my local doctor, and he said, could you send me over the report? And he said, I've never heard of this. And, he's an experienced doctor. He said, mold allergy. Yeah, we can get you tested for mold allergy. And I was like, that's
Mm-hmm.
not what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, well, I can't write you a prescription then. And I was like, the UK is meant to be one of the most developed countries in the world. And yet I can't get something that's going to make me better. Which
Right.
just sounds crazy.
Because they weren't familiar, Yeah.
Exactly. And I love the fact that you said that, it's a family practice that was
Mm-hmm.
we don't have that. We don't have a family practice that is a naturopathic family practice.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds amazing. I wish they had those here. But so do you think that mold is the primary, in a lot of cases, is the primary, almost like the gateway to the rest of these other issues then? And that's kind of, it just chips away at you over the years, and then you start to pick up all of these other things because mold has weakened your immune system and all of that. Is that how it works?
It can work that way. Definitely, you can get Lyme being a perfectly healthy person, and you get a tick bite where the particular strain or the load that you got from that bite can be enough that it can set things in the wrong motion, and if you don't get treatment early, if it's something where, oh, you feel fluey, you get a stiff neck, a little achy, painy, you get a fever, you might think, oh, I just have the flu,
Mm,
and that could be Lyme. And if you don't get treatment, that's when it can go into the chronicity part, that it can widely disperse in the body. So it certainly can be mold. I see that a lot in my chronic ill patients.
mm,
That's why I created a doctor course, because I just thought, wow, if I'm missing it, and I'm a really hardworking doctor, I'm a digger, and I did all the extra stuff, all the extra training and environmental medicine. And those were my passions, botanical medicine. I'm a try hard, as they say. So if I was missing it, I'm sure many, many doctors were. And Dr. Shoemaker is also, I'm not Shoemaker trained. We approach mold illness very differently, but I give him so much credit for standing up and getting out there into the medical world and saying, hey, we are missing something. There's this whole other problem with mold that's bigger than mold allergy. I would say that mold allergy accounts for less than 20% of my patients' symptoms. It's
really?
mostly the mycotoxins and the chemicals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in terms of, is it possible for someone to, because mold's everywhere, right? So I've moved into a completely new, it's a new build. No one's ever lived here before. And I've done an ERMI test and it's still got a score of like 6.5. It's not, nothing compared to, what it was before. I think I was living, it was like 13
Mm-hmm.
reading on an ERMI. So it feels like it's almost impossible to escape it unless you go and live out in the middle of the desert in a tent, which I know some people do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is it possible to still recover from mold whilst living around it if you do it if you approach it in the right way?
It is very hard to get better if you're still in mold. Yeah,
Right.
my teacher, Dr. Walter Crinian, he said the first three steps, the most important first three steps of any toxin-based exposure is number one, avoidance,
Mm,
number two, avoidance, Number 3, avoidance. So
Right.
you get the picture that, when we look at occupational studies, it's a coin flip. Half of the people that had that significant exposure, and one of the studies I'm thinking of, it was over a 7-year period, and they did 4 remediation attempts at different parts of the building. And I think at the end, they determined that the building was not salvageable, or maybe, I can't even remember now. I think maybe the 4th remediation finally did it. Anyway, they determined that they got people into a clean building. Half the people, just by being in the clean building, were done. They were better. Half of the people weren't. And the
Mm.
difference there is that something fundamentally changes in the flora in their body. So what we should have as a good, healthy microbiome in our gut, in our sinuses and respiratory passages, on our skin, that gets shifted into a pathogenic biofilm. So there's something in the message of the toxins that you're breathing in is saying to the flora of your body, fungus wants to move in. And bacteria wants to move in too, because water damaged buildings have bacteria as well. But bacteria, that toxin is not meant to kill or harm other living things. Mycotoxins, that is what the intention is that that's a specific gas bomb to harm or kill other microbes that want to move into the mold's territory. And if you think about what that message says to our own flora, is mold wants to move in, mold wants to kill my flora and take over my body and compost me. So yeah, it is a big influence on the body. And when I see those changes happen, what we see is that when people get out of the building, say for a weekend or something, if their symptoms don't go away after that weekend, they now are considered colonized. So they are now fundamentally changed. They become the sick building. So you can leave the sick building and still be sick from mold. One mistake that I see a lot of people do is they move their stuff, and the stuff is the sick stuff. And that's why you might move into a perfectly clean building and then you still have high mold counts. So that's where it's nice to have a building expert to be kind of helping you with that piece. I'm a
Right.
body expert. I know how to help with the body stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think I get that question a lot, like, well, mold's natural. We've coexisted with it. Well, yeah, we did, except we kept it in our compost piles. We didn't live inside with it. And
Yeah.
if you think about what mold's job is on the planet, it's to decompose previously living organic material into nutrients that other things in the forest floor can eat. Well, what do we decorate our houses with? Previously living organic material. So we build with that we decorate with. And, if you look at most like affluent countries, we have clutter, so much dust, so much stuff. It's a mold invitation. And we build our buildings the same way no matter where we live, because humans like a certain kind of internal environment. So you can be in the desert and still have a moldy house. It's our internal environment that makes the difference. So we don't change what we do, how we build at all based on where we live. And Native Americans never did that. Indigenous cultures never did that. They would change their build structures based on where they are in the world and in harmony. And we're the only animal that doesn't live in harmony with our natural space.
So do you, obviously there's I do a lot of research based on my own situation, and I see that there's a lot of link between Lyme disease and mold and people having both. But do you see a link between a lot of other chronic health issues, like numerous chronic health issues, and I guess arthritis, things like that? Do you see, is mold often at play there as well?
Yes. Mold is missed, I think, at least 25% of the time with complex chronic illness
Wow.
conditions. And Dr. Bredesen, who is an incredible researcher here in the United States, he's linked it now to dementia. He calls it inhalational dementia. So I think there are many cases of neurological issues, joint breakdown. That's one of the things mycotoxins do, is they can affect protein synthesis, which is going to affect tissues that either get beat on like our toes, our feet, our ankles, our knees, our shoulders, finger joints. And those are all the places Lyme likes to go to. So that's why they can kind of coexist. but mold will get in the way of the protein synthesis. So you can see joint issues. It's a nerve toxin, so you can see neurological issues. Many can cross the blood-brain barrier. A lot of gut issues. I wonder how much ulcerative colitis is actually mold, because mold toxins cause ulceration of the colon and the small intestine. So, I try not to have my mold goggles on. I used to have Lyme goggles when I first learned about Lyme disease, and like, oh my gosh, you can start to kind of spot it now, that I could see where it was really Lyme underneath certain things, or co-infections, like Babesia and Bartonella.
Yeah.
But now that I've become so versed in mold and understanding its mechanisms, I wouldn't be shocked if it's up to 50% of complex chronic illnesses, even neuropsych things like anxiousness, depression. There's so much that it affects that it's just astounding to me how much we're missing it.
Mm. I guess in a way, it's almost how people present their symptoms, because if someone's going and saying, I've got a lot of joint issues, I've got nerve issues, then maybe they might be more likely to be tested for mold. Whereas if they're talking about their gut, or if they're talking about anxiety, depression, then there's not as much research and stuff in that area. Is that right? Do you think that's why doctors don't tend to go down that route?
Yeah, I think, and I don't see docs really considering mold with any of those things. But I think that what makes it very confusing is that every person is going to show their mold symptoms differently based
Mm-hmm.
on their own genetics, their nutritional status, their exposure, what kind of mold or mycotoxin they're exposed to. So you can have a whole family, and it's more the rule than the exception that every person displays their mold symptoms differently. So how is a doctor supposed to figure that out? That's why I created a questionnaire. It was
Mm-hmm.
based off of Dr. Horowitz's MSIDS Lyme questionnaire, because Lyme is kind of that same thing. People with Lyme don't necessarily, even if they got the same critter, they're not going to be showing their Lyme disease in the same way. There are trends, and there are definitely trends with mold as well. We see certain symptoms that are pretty consistent, but I had to create a questionnaire for myself because I was like, okay, now I'm not understanding who of my Lyme patients actually have mold as well that is allowing the Lyme to persist.
Mm.
And do they need Lyme treatment as well as mold treatment? A lot of times, yeah, you bet. But some
Mm.
people, once we get the mold thing under control and we start to boost their immune system, their own immune system takes care of the problem with a lot less force needed
Mm.
in treating the Lyme.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said before about that. The patient you mentioned, he said that he had a lot of joint issues, nerve issues, and he would step off the sidewalk and sprain his ankle. That seems to be me. I've got so many injuries that I just can't shake now, and it feels like I've got this brittle 80-year-old man's body and not
Yeah.
a man in his 30s. It,
Yeah.
is that so? That's quite a common thing. The joint side of it with mold, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's missed a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people just think they're getting older, or maybe this is normal. Maybe everybody feels this way. And yeah, he
Yeah.
used to describe himself as the glass man. Like he can't do anything without just something breaking. And it's just
Yeah.
that's a terrible way to go through life. And that
Yeah.
does get better once you get the mold toxin, the influence of the toxins out of your body. You can start to synthesize proteins again. I've had female patients have prolapse issues. There's lots of different things that can happen when you don't, and dental problems, the teeth start to break
Mm.
down because you don't have that synthesis of the proteins that are the basic building blocks of the body.
Mm. And so I just want to talk a little bit more about kind of and we talked about it before we started recording, the mindset side of things and how that can play a role. Because let's take that guy, for example. He's had this for so long now, and he begins to identify with that as his, that's his reality. That's his situation. He is that sick person. If someone's
Mm.
so bought into that as their identity, does that then inhibit their chances of recovery, because they're so kind of, that is their reality, that is who they are, they identify with that identity so much? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that that's a real tricky spot to be in, because we can kind of also get into blaming people for being where they are. And,
Mm,
that's not the intention of what we're saying, but belief is everything. Keeping
mm,
your fight is everything. I say at the end of my book, stay in the light, because this can go to a really dark place. Mold goes to the mind. It can really make things, it can shade everything pretty dark, and it wants to compost you. So it wants to isolate, lose hope, stay put, stay stagnant, you know, eat sugar, feed it, maybe drink alcohol, whatever helps it kombucha, that kind of thing, whatever helps it persist. Once it gets a foothold, it starts to drive you. You're not driving your bus anymore. And so I think keeping that, keep your fight, stay in the light, keep your fight, but also check your belief systems a lot frequently. Just keep checking and checking on that. It's okay to identify with your condition, because that helps you with an action plan. But if you
mm.
start to lose the belief that you can get better, that's a dangerous road to go down. So continue to, when you stay in the light, you stay connected to source. Now you know the true belief, which is your body is an incredible healing vessel. It was wired to heal. It has an innate desire to heal.
Mm,
When you can stay tapped in with that, that keeps you going down the mini micro choices that you have to make every day that moves
yeah.
you toward a healing path. It's just like correcting, when you're driving a car, you make little tiny corrections that you don't even notice to stay on the straight and narrow. That's what you do. It's not these big decisions. It's the little stuff every day. Like, oh, should I get up and go walk? Oh, my ankles hurt or whatever. Get outside, go do it. Should I make
Yeah.
the greens, or will I just have chips and salsa for dinner? Make the greens, those little tiny things that can make a big difference in your health.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. And yeah, it's interesting. I mentioned to you again before we started recording that I recently went on a Joe Dispenza retreat, and all week, because it wasn't really working for me, it wasn't clicking for me until later on in the week. And you start to have those thoughts of, maybe I'm just not, that it won't work on me, these kinds of things, it won't work on me.
Mm.
And then it starts playing into that belief, I'm probably the person that won't recover. And he then, he said a few times, like, if you're sitting there thinking this isn't going to work for you, don't think you're that special, that you're the only
Yeah.
person that this stuff won't work on. And I just thought that was such a
Yeah.
brilliant way to talk about it, because it was just like, don't think you're so unique, you're so special. And that's kind of how I have had that thought for a long time. And I just realized when he was saying that so many other people in the audience, and just so many other chronic people with chronic health issues, think that same thing, that they are the one, there's something not quite right with them and they won't recover. Do you get that, that people have that, there is a belief sometimes that people have that?
You bet. And that's the beauty of social media. There's a danger of social media too, that it can feed the beast, but the beauty of it
Mm,
is that you realize you have community. You realize
mm,
that other people are as sick as you are. And I get to see that because I'm seeing many people, so I get to hear the experiences, and I can say, listen, I have patients who get better from this. So this, I understand you feel like you're in this place that you can't get out of, but there is a path out of here. And keeping that belief is so, so important.
mm.
I love his whole, neurons that fire together, wire together. So,
Yeah.
sometimes what you're doing is like, just get up. If all you can do is get up and get out of bed enough to run to the restroom, get up on the other side, put the other foot down first,
Yeah.
start to get plasticity in your mind, that we have such a science trance going on in our whole culture. All westernized culture has this trance that it has to be difficult. Someone else has to administer it to you, and I get comments on my book that people that are in the mind space of it can be easy, they're just doing the steps in the book and they're getting better. Whole families, I hear emails of just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we could do this. We didn't need
Mm,
a doctor. It's nice to have a doctor, because that helps you lead, what's my next step, and interpretation of tests and that kind of thing. But it can be easy. It takes a long time. It can be scary, and you can lose belief, but the pathway doesn't have to be complicated.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. Definitely. I think, yeah, patience is definitely a virtue with chronic
Mm.
illness, right? And I imagine, the people that you see have the best results are those that are a lot more patient and realistic. Would you say?
I think the ones that keep a sense of humor and are really into partying the small wins. I think
Yeah,
small wins and having a massive party when you get small wins, and I mean it can be the dumbest things that, oh my gosh, I just made something in my kitchen, my feet aren't aching, and then it's like, woo, have a celebration with that. And that sounds so dumb, but it isn't. Those things help feed the immune system. There's something beautiful about getting outside and just appreciating whatever you see, whether, no matter what the season is. If snow is falling, that you look at those snowflakes and really appreciate them and you see the beauty in it. All those little things of appreciation, gratefulness, celebrating the small wins, keeping a sense of humor, spending your time on things that are truly funny. And that's hard to find now. Funny without sarcasm, funny without negativism. I don't know, Carol Burnett or the old school funny. Those are the patients that shine. They
yeah.
just, or have a pet that they get to giggle at every day. I mean, they get better with more ease and quicker than the ones that are listening to the next podcast that's going to be all about the mechanisms and trying to figure it out. And, it doesn't have to be hard. It
Mm.
doesn't have to be hard.
Do you
Mm-hmm.
think and I was speaking to my practitioner about this only the other day. There's such a fine balance between getting it right and then being overly anal about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it really difficult I'm not really an anal person, but I'm kind of like an all or nothing person. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to try and do everything. But then I'm beating myself up if I miss I have to take my, my parasite cleanse 30 minutes before I was meant to eat. And I took it 20 minutes before I meant to eat. Is that really working? And
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. And do you think, do you apply more of a kind of like an 80-20, 90-10 rule to a lot of this? And by that, I don't mean 10%, 20%, you're out drinking alcohol, eating chocolate.
Right. Right.
I, I mean, just like, yeah, not being completely 100% because that's almost impossible. And then you're setting yourself up for a big fall.
Yeah. I've preached 80-20 my entire almost 2 decades of practice. Yeah. And the 20% is done with no guilt, no
Mm,
judgment, just, I love that about me. My body will figure it out whether I had that 10-minute window correctly or not. I
mm,
mean, you can be gracious with yourself, and that 80%, do it 80%, not fudging 80%, but then the other 20% is, it's, our bodies are wired to heal.
mm,
It doesn't have to be like so strict. And my patients knew this so much that the patient I was telling you about, the man that was spraining ankles, stepping off a curb, he was funny because he said, now I know you're an 80-20 person. So, I went ahead and had something. I don't remember what the conversation was, because diet is huge in my view.
mm.
Food is medicine. And I said, actually for you, I'm going to be really, really strict, and we're going to go 90-10. Because he just had a lot going on, a cancer diagnosis, whatever. But even my strict gives
Yeah.
a 10% window
Yeah.
of grace. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
grace and gentleness,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. I have 21-year-old twin boys. So when I say stuff like that, they're like, whatever, like it's not concrete enough for them. They want to know, they're like measuring their food and they're on like bulking diets and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, seriously, sushi is not a cheat meal. A cheat meal is like that's like ice cream is cheap. And so I totally understand if you're in that mindset, if anyone listening and you're just like, I'm not going to get better if I do 80-20.
Mm,
That's not true, because
yeah.
energy is everything. Intention is everything. So if you're having that 20% and it's a time where you're finally letting yourself just be a human and
Mm,
be fallible and just give yourself some grace, that's such big medicine.
mm,
If you're getting to breathe, that's big
yeah.
medicine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I I like what you said there. So you touched upon energy then, and you mentioned your shamanism roots before the call. And I, as soon as you said that, my ears pricked up, just because in recent years I've paid a lot more attention to energy, and with the whole Joe Dispenza thing. It's all about energy, and as he constantly says in all of his meditations, it's all around you, and that's what you're trying to tap into. And if you can tap into a lot of what he says, is all about tapping into a frequency where you are the person that you want to be, and you're experiencing the emotions in that reality, so much so that your body can't continue to live in the reality that you're in, and it will draw you towards that reality and that frequency. I might have butchered that
Absolutely.
explanation of it.
No, that's beautiful. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. Yeah.
cool. Well, it was a good job. I was sitting in the what's the function room for about 8 hours a day. So I finally took some in. So how could you just talk to me a little bit about that? How you got into, was that always something you were interested in? And how does that play a part, energy play a part in people's healings, do you think?
Yeah. So I think that's why I was attracted to, and I say the plants called me, botanical medicine and herbal medicine, or herbal
Mm.
medicine, if I'm going to say it right, called me. Um, I've always been tuned in. My family jokes that I've always had one foot here and one foot, we're not really sure where, where it is. So, I think the plants are like, hey, she's on our frequency level. We can talk to her. Like literally I will come to my herbal if I'm not sure what to do with a patient, and I'm like, oh, okay, we've tried so many things. What am I missing? What am I missing? And I literally will feel like I hear one of them in the bottle go, me, I want to help. So, one thing that you can lose people when you start to say everything is energy. Everything is energy, but it's expressed as something physical. And that's what's so beautiful about plant medicine, is that it has many mechanisms of action. That's why medicine hates it, because reductionist medicine can't design a study that can do the statistics of all of those mechanisms. So plants don't get studied in the mechanistic way, in the reductionistic way. Plants are deeply studied with herbal medicine and traditional medicine, practices. So I completely agree with you. This is the homeopathy. This is the concept behind homeopathy, is that you give a substance to the body in its nanoparticle dose, so an energetic dose, through water, which is also an interesting whole conversation. You should get someone on about water. You're delivering that, and the body says, "Oh, I don't resonate with this anymore, and so I now need to go find." Then you seek things that are health promoting and on that higher frequency.
Mm.
So what I see is mold sick people, if they're not working on this frequency basis, which might be taking herbal medicine and let the herbs do it for you. That's a lot of people are in that place.
Mm.
Some people also need to do, like dispense the work and heal childhood traumas, or, lots of different things. So sometimes the plants can just help you. That's why diet is so important for me too, because food is frequency. So if you're eating food that supports your energetic body, also all your mechanisms, all your minerals and that kind of thing, that food lifts you to a different frequency, to a different set of health. So food is like, someone can't do anything else, work on the food. 5 to 7 vegetables every day, no miss. Start there. Good fats, start there. Those things raise your frequency. And then you might need plants to do it. And then if you get healthy enough, you can work on the other stuff. But sometimes people just need to be lifted, just their basic cellular, the mana of us, the matter that we are needs to be lifted. And when that happens, what's so interesting is the person that went from a moldy house to another moldy house to another moldy house to another moldy house, because they're staying on that same frequency. They now go to a house that might have a little bit of mold from their stuff, but be able to be well as they work on cleaning up and remediating the stuff that they brought. Or they now say, yeah, I actually don't feel good in mold. I don't want that in my life anymore. I'm going to move. And they end up moving then to the clean space. But there is something in that energetic pattern where they almost crave like things that are going to help the mold persist. And they stay in that frequency. They go from house to house to house. So when I hear people say, there are no clean houses, mold is everywhere, that's not true. That's your experience right now. But there are clean houses. We see them a lot. We see inspectors test homes that have been remediated, and they really do remediate. It really works, So I think that work that you're doing is really important and fundamental in making sure that the places that you are, the people you are around, the habits that you have all feed you to be the healthiest frequency that you can be.
Is there, so almost like, because so when I went to see this apartment, I went to see like 4 others. So there could be something in me that's like, I chose this apartment because there was something in me that wanted to be around the mold that had been getting me sick, and because I was still vibrating on that frequency. Is that what you mean?
It's comfortable,
Yeah.
change is very uncomfortable. Or
Yeah.
at least again, we're in these trances that we've all agreed on, these lines, like change is hard, change is uncomfortable. And I just fed that. So I want to just cancel that, cancel. Change can be easy,
Yeah.
but you have to start by changing the little things, like brush your teeth with your opposite hand, those kind of things. That's the Dispenza way. That's shamanism. That's quantum healing. Like that, all people are talking about that. For me, in the way I'm delivering that frequency change is through ideally plant medicine, ideally diet, exercise, get outside, movement, circadian rhythm, sleep cycles, all those things. That's the delivery of how we're trying to do that. And a lot of people need to start at that level. And so we might be talking about something and someone listening and going, are you kidding? I'm not going to think my way out of this, And I agree. I think sometimes the body's heavier than the mind, so the body can bring you down if you're not feeding it what it needs. But you can take things that are like a drug. I don't use drugs without using plants at the same time, because I think that the plants provide the wisdom to the drug. So if we need to use pharmaceuticals for any reason, and there is a reason they're on the planet, there's a reason we have antibiotics, there's a reason that we have these things. If we're having to use that, we use a plant alongside, so that the plant is bringing the wisdom, the mechanisms, and also the frequency to keep it as high vibe as possible.
So with mold, sorry to kind of like keep going back and forward. Switching from different subjects is just
I love it. This is
with medication for mold, because originally, you go online and you see cholestyramine, so you're like, oh, that's medication that's going to get it out of my body. I need that, and that's what I thought. And then when I'm dealing with my practitioner, she sees that as almost like a bit of a last resort, and to focus on more of the natural stuff, natural binders, like initially. Is that what you do? Is it Cellcore? Do you use their kind of products?
Again, I'm in family practice and I'm in a factory farm town, whatever.
Right.
We use good old fashioned psyllium husk, good old fashioned flax
Oh, right.
seeds, insoluble fiber. If we think about what are we binding with mold, if it's from a respirable toxin, that means it goes to your bloodstream, and it goes down 2 pathways, either to your kidneys to be peed out. That's why we can see it in a urine mycotoxin test, or it goes to the liver, and the liver packages it up in bile, and that bile gets sent to the intestines, and that's what we're binding. We're actually binding the bile. So what we find in studies, like people that are missing their gallbladder and they're having trouble with too much bile, in those studies, those are great studies because they're nothing about mold. It's about what binds bile the best. We see that insoluble fiber does a very, very good job. And so I'm in full agreement with that person, with your practitioner, that cholestyramine for me is not a place to start. It causes nutritional deficiencies. It can cause constipation. And my rule of thumb is no binders if you're bound up. Because if you're constipated, now that binding, which is kind of like static cling, just becomes unbound, and now you have a mycotoxin that can damage the intestinal wall. So my first thing is pre-binders. If somebody isn't moving their bowels 2 times a day religiously, we go to the pre-binders. We go to the things that are going to move bile, because the number one thing before you add the binder is we got to make sure that person is making and moving adequate amounts of bile. So that's why I use lots of good fats to stimulate that bile release, and then things that taste bitter, which might be food, or we might have to use bitter plants. But the bitter taste on your tongue starts a complete secretion through your whole body, because bitters are associated with poison. Bitter is usually a poisonous plant, and this is like reptilian. This is something that we have like deep in our survival is, oop, it's bitter. We better start kicking up our immune system cells. That's that CD57. Bitters will help stimulate that up. Bitters will help secretions and movement of the digestive system to move the toxin out. And it's just such a beautiful message of like, it's then making the brain trust itself, because your reptilian brain is saying, I'm not safe, something's wrong. Yeah, that's where that anxiousness comes from. And then your thinking brain uses its senses and says, I don't see a tiger. I don't see what you're talking about. And so the two parts of the brain stop talking. They stop communicating, so that limbic system can continue to loop and say, I'm not safe, I'm not safe, I'm not safe, something's wrong. And that's now feeding the belief system of something's fundamentally wrong with me. So when you add a little bitter, now the reptilian brain says, well, the thinking brain says, oh my gosh, something is wrong. And now the two parts of the brain can start to talk again. And the bitter causes this complete flush of toxins from the lymph system. And so we have to move it from the lymph into the liver. That's this whole part that we're not paying attention to with mold. Then if we get the bitters, then if you're having a bowel movement 2 times a day, then we can add insoluble fiber, which is a very effective bile binder, and that carries it out of the body. So you have to now make good, clean bile, but you have to have enough fats. So that's why I'm like, diet, 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 diet. 5 to 7 servings of vegetables, tons of good fats, and the taste of bitter on your tongue. Start there. That's just elegant.
Yeah. Well, when you say taste of bitter, like, do you mean like, so like a lemon water or something like that? Or like what kind of, no.
Yeah, that's sour. So bitter is like, have you ever heard of bitters? Like with a drink, you have Angostura bitters or whatever that you can add to a Manhattan or whatever. So that's one form of bitters. My preference is bitters that are made, and this is old medicine. This is old herbal, old crusty medicine, but it works. Using a little bit of bitters on your tongue, and they're called bitters. There's something called Swedish bitters or bittersweet elixir. You probably have Gaia herbs in the UK. I think Gaia is over there. Gaia makes one called Swedish bitters.
Okay.
And the idea is that you get a little bit of bitter on your tongue before you eat, and that will stimulate. And old medicine is you would eat like watercress or arugula at the beginning of your meal to start to get the digestive juices going. Well, when you have mold toxicity, you need to thump that harder than just dietary, in my experience. People need to actually take a little bitter on their tongue. So yeah, that starts the whole process. And then when you eat, now you have digestive juices. Now you have insulin. Now you have stomach acid. Now you have all of the things that help us metabolize our food better. And then you bring in the fiber with your food, which not only binds bile, but it feeds our microbiome its favorite food. So you're actually feeding the good guys rather than taking a pharmaceutical drug called cholestyramine, which is a very effective bile binder. I understand why Dr. Shoemaker uses it, but it also has negative effects on the microbiome, whereas you can use insoluble fiber and you've just fed 2 birds with 1 seed, so to speak.
Wow. I wouldn't have thought that just that introduction of the bitters, the Swedish bitters, that would have that much of an impact. That's I'm definitely going to look that up. Thank you for
yeah.
for
If anybody wants
that.
to hear my whole take on bitters, I did do a talk. I think if you're a practitioner, I don't know if you can take it if you're not a practitioner, but Gaia Professional has educational things, and I did a whole hour on bitters, and it's very, very into the minutia. But if anyone listening is a practitioner and wants to get into it, you can contact Gaia and find out how to get access to it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And
it's an hour long of bitters.
but just for the short version, because for me, just before meal, right before meals, and that would have
Yes.
quite a big impact with it.
Yes. Has a
Yeah.
nice, they call it alterative. That's an old herbal term, meaning it alters your body by manipulating many places in a small way. So if you do it at every meal or you do a little bit all the time, then
Mm.
it alters your state to a more health promoting state. Yeah, that's a
That's
cool term, I think.
Yeah, very. And it just, when you were saying that, I think that could be said for anything when you're trying with health, right? Just don't trying to do a little bit, but just do it consistently rather than
Mhm.
trying to do loads of things, for a couple of weeks, then giving up and trying something else.
Right, right. And that whole idea of going for the herks, that's applying reductionist medicine again, or conventional medicine to something where natural medicine is uniquely suited for mold treatment. I mean,
Mm.
this is the kind of medicine you need for mold treatment because it's a toxicity based illness and an immune depleted illness. We don't have things in medicine that build the immune system without a lot of side effects.
Mm.
But guess what does that? Nature
Mm.
boosts your natural killer cells. That's that CD57 count is a natural killer cell count.
Yeah.
Outside and appreciation, not just being outside, but appreciation then can boost your natural killer cells by 10,000 after 1/2 hour time. 20 minutes, I think, is what they did in the studies. I mean, let's do that. That's sunshine, you
Mm.
know? I was recently on Clubhouse just kind of trying to learn it, which I'm not a fan of that platform. And someone on there was like an entrepreneur. It was like an entrepreneur talk or whatever. And he says, how can we monetize air and sunshine? And I just thought, wow, we are, yikes. Like talk about cancel culture. That's got to get canceled. That whole thought process. Are you kidding me?
I hope he was met with a wall of silence.
Well,
Uh,
at least I did. Yeah, I clicked off. I was like, that's ridiculous. But I think what he's tapping into is these are things that nobody is monetizing.
mm,
So the message of how important they are isn't getting reinforced anywhere because it's
yeah.
free and no one's making money off of it yet, unless that
Yeah.
guy gets
Yeah.
monetized.
Well, I think about that all the time. 'Cause I mean, as I record this right now, I'm sitting in a nice block of flats, but a block of flats, apartments in London. Not exactly, the most, health promoting place in the world. And I often think if I could just live closer to, the ocean, where I could go for a walk on the beach every day, or it would actually, being closer to the ocean or being close to nature would actually get me to go outside more. That in
Mm,
itself would have such a big impact.
mm.
Do you think that the location where you live, well, I guess it must do, right? The location where you live, your environment is huge, not just the house you live in.
Right. Yeah. And how easy it is to get to green space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I consult with someone who is in a very, very big city, and we were able to see her white blood cell count go up and her natural killer cell function increase by going out to her stoop and sit with the tree on her block. And she would just go sit with it and appreciate the heck out of it. And then she did it early in the morning. So that's another key is like the earlier you can get outside, get up with the sun kind of an idea,
Mm,
that sets a whole circadian rhythm thing in motion. There's so many body systems that are driven by our circadian rhythm. So then you're going with the flow instead of against the flow.
mm.
So if the most important thing, I know I diet, I keep saying what's the most important thing. Now people are being like, she said 4 most important things. So yeah, diet super important, but also getting your body outdoors and spending some appreciative time with any tiny piece of nature that you can find,
Mm,
anything. And
mm.
that as early in the day as possible. 20 minutes is what was used in the studies. And it doesn't have, I want to see it be done every day for my patients, but if you have a house plant and that's all you can do that day, start there. That's
Mm.
so important. Get by a window in the earliest part of the day as you can and spend time in appreciation of
Yeah.
whatever the natural thing is. And if you're even just looking outside and there's a little something you can find, it's tough in the city. It is tough to find that, location really matters.
Yeah. Well, on this
Mhm.
on the Joe Dispenza retreat, I was speaking to this lady who was in my group at the time, and she was talking about she went and did this walking meditation in the morning, and she told me she went out and it was in this, she lives in California somewhere, and she went into this canyon and then finished it on the beach. And I was thinking, if I had to do that, I'd be walking around like the block essentially, where,
Yeah.
there's a factory nearby and there's just like, big buses coming past. So yeah, I think it's certainly something. I think living in the city was a lot of fun in my 20s, and then as you get a bit older, getting into nature, and you almost use excuses not to get out into nature because it's not really that accessible, so there's no point, so then you spend more
Right.
time inside.
Right. Yeah, and in the Japanese study, the forest bathing studies, they would go on the weekend because they couldn't get out to it's like a trek to
Yeah,
get out to nature. So they would go on the weekend, and they saw that those results did stick. So the increase that they got, so it's worth it. If
yeah,
anything that you can do to get out with nature.
definitely.
Ideally, it's every day, but got to start with where you are.
Yeah,
And I'm so excited to see cities that are doing more intelligent design and realizing that, we need insects, we need pollinators, we need all of these other things and green spaces in cities. Taking over, like in New York City, they took over a subway line, the High Line, and they made it a walkable park. And it's just
really.
this, yeah, it's beautiful. If you're ever been to the city, you should see it. It's really a neat walk. So it's this green space floating above the city that used to be subway line, or I think it was a rail line, that is now a walkable park. And so there are different, Chicago just did that as well with one of their elevated subway lines. I
Wow.
think cities are starting to understand that the health of the people that live there are important. Their environment is important, and
Mm,
having green spaces.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So hopefully London will get there.
Yeah,
London's beautiful though.
it's what, sorry, it's cool.
It's beautiful.
No,
Yeah.
it is, but we tend to, you guys will do it, you guys in the States will do it, and then 10 years later we might make some changes, which is frustrating. But something else I wanted to just ask you about people. So the person you spoke about earlier, and people, me included, really, we've had these issues for years now. Some a couple of years, some 10 years plus. Do you see people like that who've had it for so many years and have gone down so many different routes, and then they finally come across mold? Is that, do you see those people then ended up making full recovery? Is that like a common thing that you see?
I think that once there isn't a secondary condition that has started, so a cancer, a dementia, an MS, an ALS, some of those things, now we're chasing a different boulder down a hill.
Yeah,
Um, that makes it a little harder to get a full recovery because something has now shifted that's a secondary condition.
yeah,
Autoimmune disease is really tough. We do get, massive improvement, less flares, and the flares aren't as severe, those kinds of things. There's more resilience. It doesn't take as much to tip things over. But I have plenty of cases where there was a dementia diagnosis and there's no dementia anymore. Like I
wow.
have in my book, I talk about one with CPAP. Her CPAP was giving her dementia because it had not only mold, but bacteria in it. And she was breathing it all night long. And with all of the changes, avoidance being the main thing, and also all of the treatment, like getting some blood flow up to her brain, using the bioflavonoids. In that case, we used resveratrol because it's really good for the brain. Using the good fats, so having, like I talked about, the plants and the food and those kind of things that can reset the body. We didn't have to use any medication. I just ran into her at the health food store, sharp as a tack again. She's like edging on 80 and
Wow.
doing, living the life, like living the healthy life, gets to the pool every day, eats well, has strong relationships, all of the right things.
Mm,
Where had we not found the mold, it would have just been a downstream. Yeah. So can you get better from this and be 100%? Yes.
mm,
Yes. And
yeah.
some people actually that came into this having had like a childhood exposure to it actually end up better than they were, because now they're doing all of the health promoting lifestyle, because now they're starting to see like, wow, I just thought everybody felt this tired. I didn't know how everyone was moving at such a fast pace.
Yeah.
And now, as they feel better, are realizing, okay, I was just sick. I just didn't know it. Yeah.
I love that, because that's the goal for me. Just I don't want to be how I was 10 years or 12 years ago. I want to be better. I want to feel better than ever, I ever did before.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
such an amazing goal to have. And when I think about it, in my younger years, I did have like weird little health things that came up, but I think I just brushed them off and just assumed that was how everyone felt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You
yeah.
just kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, soldier on. And you can when you're younger because you have more vitality you can draw from. It gets harder as you get older. But this
Yeah.
idea that we get, that aching and achy, painy, low energy, low sex drive, bad sleep, that's just part of getting older. No way. I have the healthiest patients. And like I said, that woman, when Jay came to me, I think she was 72 at the time, and I was treating the whole family. So, everybody, it's all the generations or whatever. And they're just like, yeah, mom's going downhill. We don't know what's going on. And here it was mold in her CPAP, and she's fine now, So it doesn't have to be that story that it like a forever degradation and then you die kind of thing, no way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people, once something happens, I hear, and I heard it on your podcast, a couple of your guests said, I would never wish that didn't ever happen to me, having that chronic illness, because I now appreciate things and I'm taking much better care of my body. I've reprioritized what's really important in life, like having the whatever, the family, or, doing all the shoulds. So that's one thing I think also in that belief thing is starting to ask, what's the gift in this? When you're really sick and I say that to you, people are going to want to punch me in the face, like, no way, there's no gift in this. So be gentle with yourself. You may not be at that place right now to be asking that question. That's okay. But as you come out of it, and once we start to get into the resiliency part, that's when we start to see, okay, wow, not only am I changing my frequency, I'm changing like so many things in my life and my prioritizations. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
It's cool. It's cool to witness.
yeah, I love thinking about that part of it, and I actually put out a video to say, 5 reasons why chronic illness would be the best thing that ever happened to me, and I could think of a lot more than 5, and I'm still kind of in the middle of it. I'm still dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. But I wouldn't be here now recording this episode with you. I'd be well, probably wouldn't be in an office because of COVID. But let's say COVID hadn't happened. I would be in an office and I'd have a boss and he would be telling me what to do. I wouldn't be running my own business. And I'm just a bit of a better person. And not that I was a really bad person, but I've just had to look at a different side of life. And I've said it a few times on the podcast, I've realized that actually life's a lot more magical than you think it is. And it's not just as black and white as the media and government and everyone tells you it is, which is just a really nice way to think about life.
It's very magical if you let it be.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I want to hear your 5 reasons. I'm going to go look that up. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a short video, so yeah, please do.
Yeah.
My final question for you is that, and I often ask it to people who are on the show from from their perspective of where they've been, but asking you because you've been with people at their darkest hours and you've been there when they've said to you, I imagine, I don't think I can get through this, will I always be like this? And they've voiced those darkest hour concerns to you. There's a lot of people who'll be listening to this episode in their darkest hour at the moment. What's your advice to them, more from a mental point of view, like moving forward? What would be your advice to someone in that situation now?
I think you just said the magic 2 words: move forward.
Yeah.
It's just one. Yeah. I don't know how many times I've said, keep working the plan. Because, healing, I have in my book, I have this diagram that it's like how we want healing to work is this line that just kind of goes straight up. And, the more I'm a good patient and I do all these changes, then I'm going to get incremental improvement, like rewards. That's not how healing works. Healing
Yeah.
works in a total screwball Celtic knot. And that if you just keep working the plan, making those tiny little things that are good for you. We all know we should eat more vegetables. We all know we should get to sleep at night and turn the screen off. We all know we need to get up and move our bodies. Some of us are more impaired to be able to move, but whatever you can move, and just keep moving forward, because the message that mold is telling your brain is stay put. Don't worry, I got it. I'll compost you. So if you're sending the message that you're not using your body, mold will use it for you. So keep moving forward and realize, like, work the plan, stick with the plan. You're going to have good days and bad days. That's part of it. What we're looking for is that the bad days are less bad and less frequent, and your good days get better and better, and they last longer. And that crowding out of the bad days is how healing works.
Awesome. I think we just got a video clip to promote this on Instagram. Just what you said there. Love that. That was awesome. If people wanted to connect with you, or so do you actually? You mentioned, and I looked it up before. I saw that you've got you train other people now, so then they can teach, so they can practice and heal people in in the same way that you do. Is that where you spend your time now, or do you actually take on your own patients still?
I'm not taking new patients. When I dedicated myself to writing the book and creating courses for doctors, I just stopped taking new patients.
Yeah.
And then after writing my book, there are a lot of people that did want to work with me. And so I created a membership. So it's like a group appointment sort of thing, or group learning. I shouldn't say appointment because I'm not actually directly treating anybody, but it is a place to come pick my brain. We have Q&As. We have these member shares, we call it, which is like an open Zoom room where everyone can just share what's working and I'm on. And, so it's a sort of a moderated social media experience where you actually have an expert that can say, I don't think that's right, or yeah, that's totally. So that's available to people if they're looking for community and they're really looking for finding people that are in the same space, but also having some of my expertise, infused in that. I bring people in my kitchen, like I have videos where we make food and I teach you how to make herbal medicine, like make your own elderberry cordial for COVID, all of this kind of stuff. So that's part of the membership. And then I'm working to I'm actually taking July and August off of interviews and things like this to write about pandas and pans and do a doctor course for that as well. So yeah, that's why I know people are really frustrated because they're like, but I want to see you as a patient. And I'm really trying to scale what's up here in the old noggin and teach more doctors, because if we have more doctors that understand, then we have much more access for people to get help.
Exactly. I think I could see where someone's frustration may lie for them right there and then. But if you can train 10 people who can train 10 people who can train 10 people, then suddenly, in 10 years time, we don't have someone who, someone has strange symptoms, they go to the doctor and they actually get the answer straight away rather than, going down a rabbit hole for 10 years.
Yeah. That's why I'm really into ILADS as well. I'm an ILADS member for Lyme disease, because they're working so hard to educate doctors and to bring Lyme disease into the fold, the medical fold. And that's what I'm doing with mold. Dr. Shoemaker as well. We have different approaches, but there's lots of other doctors out there, Dr. Carnahan, Dr. Jess Petras. Like there's all these people trying to push the awareness of mold, and that means we can't see as many patients, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, more access is what I'm after.
Awesome. And so people wanted to look you up on Instagram. Is it Dr. Jill Crista? Is that your handle?
Yep. Or my website is drcrista.com, drcrista.com. And if you're listening, you're thinking, I wonder if mold does part of my story. I have a quiz on moldquiz.com. That's just goes through. It's very short because I know people have mold brain. It's just 10 questions. And if you want to read the stuff, you can read. Otherwise, just answer the questions and you get your results. And I'll send you an individualized plan of, like, if it is mold and you answered these particular answers, then these are some things you might want to consider for your particular mold story.
Awesome. Yeah, I think anyone listening who hasn't ever considered mold, please go and get that test done, because it's yeah, definitely you could save yourself a lot of time.
Yeah, you bet. I know people have mold brain. I have Instagram videos that are a minute or less. I try to keep it real short, really to the point, and hopefully have things out there. I try to answer questions that I get emailed. If I see a lot of the same question, then I'll shoot off a video and try to answer that question. So definitely reach out. If anyone has questions, you can send me an email. I do read them all. I don't necessarily respond to all of them individually, but that helps me target the next education stuff that I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sparing the time to come on. Really, really appreciate it. I know I got a lot from it, so I know others will. And I think, really, really interesting to have your story. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.